All right, so this video that I'm gonna do right now is probably more of one of those in-depth videos. So I may do a little deeper dive into this video, but I wanted to at least do a short video on it because it was a conversation that I just had with one of my clients about carbs. And if you've been here before, you've probably heard me say that there's a reason why you have never ever heard of a high carbohydrate weight loss diet. You've heard of high protein weight loss diets and you've heard of high fat weight loss diets, but you have probably never heard of a high carbohydrate weight loss diet. I've been a coach and a trainer now for 35 years and I have never ever heard of a high carbohydrate weight loss diet. Now, that's probably because they don't work. Now, I'm not a believer in zero carbs, okay? However, I do know, and you probably know as well, that when you start to cut back carbs, it is amazing how much weight you can lose. Not just weight, but body fat as well. So I was talking with one of my clients and we were talking about different strategies to eliminate, not eliminate, but limit. I meant limit. I just said I was not a believer in zero carbs, and I'm not. But I meant to say limit, not eliminate. But to limit the amount of carbs that she's taking in. And I just realized that there's a mistake that a lot of people make with carbs that they don't even realize they're making. So yes, you're trying to cut back your carbohydrates. But if you're still struggling losing weight, this might be the thing that's holding you back. And making this one change might be exactly what you need to go from cutting back carbs and still struggling or having a hard time losing weight to cutting back carbs and doing it the right way and finally starting to see the weight loss success that you want to see. So 100 grams of carbs in the morning is not the same as 100 grams of carbs in the afternoon, is not the same as 100 grams of carbs at night. And this client does an intermittent fasting where she kind of eats the majority of her calories at night. So she doesn't eat anything in the morning. She eats very little in the afternoon, and she has this very small eating window that is primarily in the evening. And generally speaking, when a lot of people do intermittent fasting, this is generally one of the ways that they do it. And I am not a huge believer in this way of doing intermittent fasting. And I've seen far better results with people that actually switch the way they do intermittent fasting. And this is what led me to kind of talk about to this client one of the strategies that she should change in order to help her get better results with carbs. But let me go back to the whole thing about carbs being different at different times of the day. So there's 4 calories per gram of carbs. So whether you have those 100 grams of carbs in the morning, afternoon, and night, it's still 100 grams. However, 100 grams of carbs before you go to sleep is going to be processed differently than 100 grams of carbs prior to your workout. And this is where most people go wrong with carbs, is they're having the majority of their carbs around the times where their bodies don't need them. So you got to remember that carbs are a source of energy and one of the main sources of energy. Now, I'm not saying that they are the best source of energy, but they are the main source of energy. And that's really all carbs are meant for, is for energy, whereas protein and fats, your bodies have many other things that your bodies can do with those rather than or other than energy. Now, there's a such thing as essential proteins, essential fats, but no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. So what does the word essential mean? The word essential means that your body cannot, or we cannot produce amino acids, which is what makes up proteins, on our own. That means we need to eat them, we need to ingest them, we need to take them in from outside sources, food and supplements. Same thing with fats. There are essential fats that our bodies can't manufacture on their own, so we need to take these in. However, there is no such thing as essential carbohydrates. So can we live without carbs? The answer is yes. Now, I will admit, that certain things will be better with a certain amount of carbohydrates. However, we don't necessarily need them. But going back to the point I was making about when you eat your carbs, if I have that same 100 grams of carbs before my workout, my body is going to utilize those carbs for energy for my workout rather than having those carbs at night while be right before I go to sleep. Now, why is that important? Because anything that we do not use, we store. And what we want to do with carbs is we want to use them for energy and not store them. And this is where a lot of people go wrong is they just cut their carbs, but they continue to eat them at the wrong times of day. And they still struggle losing weight. So what I encourage all my clients to do and what I teach them to do is eat your carbs when your body has the best chance of using them and the least chance of storing them. So what I tell all my clients is eat your carbs around the time of the day where you're going to be busiest. So if you work a very manual, heavy labor job, you would want to be consuming those carbs during your workday. If you're on your feet a lot, if you're moving around a lot, if you're doing activities that are above and beyond what's considered normal, before your workouts, after your workouts, and during those times of the day where you're not really busy, you're not really active, you're not really moving around, you want to limit the amount of carbohydrates you need because you really don't need them. Most of the day when I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm on coaching calls, my body has zero need for carbohydrates. So it would be a mistake for me to be eating a lot of carbs during my workday. But prior to my workout, yes. After my workout, yes. And if you are going to have carbs at these times where you're not as busy, what I always recommend my clients and what I'm going to recommend you do is make sure you add some physical activity in after you have those carbs. So let's say you're having carbs for dinner, but your dinner isn't your dinner time or your evenings aren't very active. What I tell all my clients to do is go out for a 20 to 40-minute walk. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but what you want to do is you want to get those carbs to start moving through the system to get them to start burning so that you can burn more of them and store less of them. Again, we want to make sure that we're having carbs around the times where we're going to use them and not store them. And since carbs are such a great source of energy, I am not saying that carbs are not a good source of energy. They are a really good source of energy. You have endurance athletes that are having sometimes 200, 300, 400 grams of carbs per day on the days that they're training heavy. But that's the thing. An endurance and a runner, a cyclist, a swimmer, they're out there working out for 2, 3 or more hours. Their bodies are going to burn through those carbohydrates. That's why they can eat all those carbs on a regular basis and look the way they look. Yet the average person like you and me, we eat that many carbs, and that's how we end up overweight because we sit, we don't move enough, and we're not using them. So if you're making that mistake with carbohydrates where you are not taking into consideration, maybe because you didn't know so, but if you're not taking into consideration when to eat the carbs, it's not just important that you cut back on them. That is an important key. Okay, now, if you're eating 300, 400 grams of carbs and you are not an endurance athlete or very, very extremely active, you're going to gain weight. I don't care how you time them. Okay, but cut back your carbs. If you're still struggling or if you noticed a plateau, you're still struggling losing weight, what you want to do is now start to time your carbs better. So it's not just about how many you're eating, but it's about when you're eating. And if you have any other questions on this topic or more, click the first link below in the description, fill out the form, and the two of us will figure out what we need to do to get you from where you're at to where you want to be.